Hello and welcome to another episode of Sustainability in Your Ear. It's the Earth911 podcast, and I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. Today, we're joined by Billy Johnson, who's the chief lobbyist for the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries. That's the main lobby and industry organization for the recycling industry in the United States. Billy, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us. Yes, we like to consider ISRI the voice of the recycling industry.
Well, and in fact, Earth911 joined this year because we believe you are a voice as well. And so we want to support that. So let's talk about
We're happy to have you.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be, not had, I guess, but you know. So let's talk about what the key topics ISRI is focused on for 2019, and particularly in the wake of 2018, which was so disruptive in the industry because China banned the import of most of the recycling that we send over from the United States. What's top of mind for you as we go into 2019?
Well, one thing we'd like to make sure that everybody understands and is aware of is that, recycling works. Recycling still works. It hasn't gone away. It's both an economic driver that has countless environmental benefits, and it's something that every individual can take part in every single day and make a real environmental difference as well as an economic difference. The other is that recycling is a very, very dynamic industry, and it always has been. Mm-hmm. We're always responding to constantly changing products and materials, changing markets, as what happened in China, transportation issues, worker shortages, among many, many other challenges that my members face every single day, and in largely surpass them. They get past all these problems. Recycling is also what a lot of people don't understand. It's a heavily capital intensive industry. It's highly technical, mm-hmm. and it uses very, very, very sophisticated equipment, and it's a sophisticated industry for that matter, that produces specification grade commodities that are in high demand throughout the world. And that's important, is we don't just take materials and just bale them up and sell them to somebody. They're sorted, they're separated, and they're made into these very, very exacting specifications that the customer who's going to make new material needs them to be made to. Otherwise, it'll ruin what they're making. It's estimated that about 40% of the feedstock used in manufacturing comes from scrap. In some industries, it's even higher than that. Even new virgin material like steel and aluminum, they use scrap material in there to provide a lot of the alloys and other types of ingredients that they need for their performance characteristics.
Sure. Well, for instance, the automobile industry, about 70% of every new car manufactured in the United States is using recycled steel.
That's correct. And the reasoning is that recycled material uses, one, it can be cheaper, and two, it saves tremendous amounts of energy. And energy is money. And so manufacturers have figured that out, that using the recycled material will save them money and make them much more cost efficient and ultimately more competitive. So it's a win-win-win for everybody there. And manufacturers, as you say, they are competing for that material, whether it be from commercial, industrial, or municipal sources.
And as you said, recycling hasn't stopped. There is this kind of widespread, and I think fear-based reporting about this, that, for instance, glass is no longer recyclable. Well, it isn't accepted because the market has changed so much, but we can change the marketplace by affecting policy and being more efficient in our own recycling. And I'll tell you, I didn't really grasp the technical nature of this industry until I attended the ISRI convention, and the equipment is incredibly sophisticated and often the size of a building. So capital-intensive investment, these are capital-intensive investments with long-term payouts that we have to be able to make policy to allow people to make in the first place, or we are going to end up without a system that can be financed.
So correct. Yes, because these machines are not cheap. And as more technology is put into these machines, better sorting and separation machines, to get the commodities to an even finer and a more exacting specification, that requires more money, more investment, and more technology. And as you just said, our convention's coming up in about a week, and we will see even newer, cooler things, machines that are going to be displayed for people to purchase. And some of these things that you would not believe from artificial intelligence is starting to filter into the to the recycling equipment.
Sure, in order to identify materials. So let's talk about contamination, because that is what China's ban had to do with. They felt that they were getting unclean recycled materials. And as you say, the technology is evolving for us to do better and better at sorting. But there's also a large component of consumer participation in certain dimensions of the industry, such as plastics and glass, where a lot of that comes out of the home through the blue bin. How does ISRI see linking what a consumer does at the curbside to the national outcome? In this case, we actually surprisingly exported more scrap metal than 2017, 13% more, despite the Chinese ban. How do you link all this together? And in particular, how does international trade policy affect what I do at the curb? I know that tariffs play a big part in what is actually shipped around the world to be recycled.
Well, those are a lot of good questions. Yes, trade, the market, markets determine where this material goes. And as people around the world want this material, they will pay for it and pay to get it. And they also are asking for the material to be, as I mentioned, in very clearly defined specifications.
Right.
And in the case of China, they have evolved manufacturing-wise and want a higher grade of material, and this is a good thing. It's making recyclers in the United States as well as around the world have to rethink what they're doing, and it's making them have to improve. And there's nothing wrong with improving. It's going to make recyclable materials even, hopefully, even more in demand, because they're doing what I mentioned before. They're saving manufacturers money, they're saving them energy, and that's ultimately conserving natural resources and protecting the environment. So a number of things that are going on, not just in technology, but it's trying to educate the citizen. Because, as I mentioned, about 30% of the recycling happens at the citizen level, and about 70% happens in the commercial and industrial areas. So improving the citizens' awareness and educating them about what should go into the bin and what shouldn't. And what happens is when that gets messed up at the get-go is that you've contaminated a lot of that material and contaminated it to a point where it can't therefore get processed and then get reused. You've damaged it. And that's that's an age-old problem. But as we have more and more different types of materials and sophisticated materials, this becomes even more of a challenge. And, for the average citizen, they can't know all the different types of resins and things like that are out there. So educating them is very, very important. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of some things that have happened over the last couple of years that have, even before the China issue that came up. The National League of Cities released a report where they focused in on a number of cities that had re-examined their recycling policies and their programs. And some of the things that they did was obviously they educated their citizens about what to put in and what not to put in. They put placards on the bins to further do that, because as you go from one city to another city, different cities accept different materials.
Sure.
And so clearly telling citizens what they should and should not, in some cases, more importantly, what they should not put into the bin is very, very important. Because once you do that, now you have a much cleaner stream right from the get-go. And that is so important, because now I don't have to sort and separate it as much as I did before. It's already done because the citizen did it. They didn't confuse the material to begin with. That will just make such a difference. Some of these, other ways that the cities have done that is social media, public service announcements, and different and articles that have been written to help explain why these changes are happening, and why the importance for them. And in doing that, the cities are actually doing a lot of these cities are doing a very, very good job, and they're responding to the marketplace. They're responding to businesses around the world that are purchasing their material. It's not just going down the street to the local manufacturer, if one even exists there. It is on these commodities are on the global marketplace, and so what you put into that bin ultimately could be reused in Indiana. It could also be used in Bangladesh. It could be used in Bangkok. It could be used anywhere, and that's the beauty of the material. It's going to find a home. It just might not be nearby, or it might be nearby. That's the great part about these materials being reused all the time, and that's keeping our virgin materials safe for future generations.
So, what role? I mean, the United States exports as a net exporter of recycled material. But we have no tariffs for import of recycled materials, and other countries do. How does that affect the efficacy of what we do here in the States in terms of keeping the price low enough that it is viable to take American waste and use it in a product in Bangladesh?
Well, we wouldn't call it waste, first off. We would call it valuable scrap material, commodity. Now that you're an ISRI member, we will indoctrinate you to believe this.
I just slapped my hand.
Get you onto that. Good. That's the long arm of the ISRI law has come to your office. But yes, tariffs distort markets in large part. So just as dumping products also distort markets. We believe in free, fair trade of these materials. So what happens is that when a country puts up a barrier like that and creates effectively a disadvantage to their manufacturers, is what's going on. And so it raises the price of those recyclable materials going into their country to be used. And especially as in some countries that charge different tariffs for different to different countries. And so here at ISRI, we believe in leveling that playing field so that anyone could buy our material at the same price plus the costs of transportation and things like that.
Now there's a WTO.
So I was going to say I have colleagues that work on this. This is their daytime job, fighting to do that, and in many different agreements, international agreements, and they do a great job.
So, am I correct that the thing that folks who want to follow up and kind of keep track of that question need to look at is the environmental goods agreement at the WTO? Is that the primary?
That is one of them. Yes. Yes, that's probably one of the primary ones to look at to reduce a lot of those tariffs. And we're also, and a lot of it becomes, we're always looking for new markets. There's countries that the United States has not necessarily exported to or exported that much to. Mm-hmm. And so we're always looking to try to find new markets and expand those markets for our recyclers here at home, because when they do that, that creates more demand for that material, and that's good for our members.
And what about the evolution of the domestic recycling industry so that we might also capture more of this here at home and reduce our use of raw materials as well? What kind of infrastructure do we need to be investing in as a country? Well,
in the private sector, we have a lot of that. And, one of the greatest things that has happened for recycling has been the 100% expensing for recycling equipment. Back in 2008, I believe, we got a permanent accelerated depreciation for qualified recycling equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And why that was important is this equipment's expensive, and it's getting more expensive every day. And
Sure.
part of that is the new technologies that are being rolled into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that also did, so we had we had members who were and other people who were unfortunately not ISRI members, who were purchasing equipment to recycle. And as is very expensive, the depreciation got them off the fence of whether they were going to buy it or not. It also allowed them to build in basically a pattern so that they would buy it today and then use it for a number of years to pretty much its useful life for them, and then sell it,
Mm-hmm.
and someone else could buy it and use it for a number of more years, and that they would rotate that out and buy new equipment. And they would buy the new equipment because it might be more efficient,
Mm-hmm.
food, energy efficient, but it also may include new technologies that allow them to make a purer material. It may have more safety devices on that, so to
Mm-hmm.
protect their workers there. So there's it's always good to kind of keep moving new material, new equipment, I should say, into the process. That makes us much better, and it makes us more competitive worldwide. So the tax policy, the federal tax policy was very, very important for our members, and you will see that as you go around the ISRI convention, a lot of those manufacturers will talk about how you can depreciate their equipment, and that's a very, very big deal for them.
And that also brings home the idea of reuse, even within the recycling industry. The fact that I could pass
Absolutely.
down a glass crusher, which can cost $250,000 quite easily, to another municipality that could use it, that doesn't have the same demands that my bigger municipality does, allows us to diffuse the technology across the entire economy over time. I guess the real problem is how do you accelerate that? And of course, that's what we're all trying to figure out as business people and as citizens. So now I know that one of the big issues you're working on has to do with how we transport scrap, ferrous scrap in the United States by rail. And can you tell us about the Surface Transportation Board's 2016 rail exemption ruling and what it means to recycling?
Sure. I will keep this pretty high level, because if not, we can put everybody to sleep very quickly. To kind of jump back in time, the railroads have common carrier obligations. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they made arrangements with a lot of different industries, especially in the commodities industry, to, based on other types of transportation, that they would promise certain service at certain prices, and everything would be fine and dandy. And to a large extent, that was the case for many years. As the railroads started to merge with each other, as trucking became, we had more shortages and became more expensive, congestion on the roads, and a number of other types of transportation-related issues. The service and the prices, the service got bad, and in a lot of cases, and the prices went up. In fact, there's a recent new policy by the railroads to charge for the storage of rail cars. And so by revoking this exemption that the railroad has now, what it would simply do is it would provide the oversight of the railroads back for our industry, for that, for ferrous scrap, to the Surface Transportation Board. Currently, the Surface Transportation Board really doesn't have any real oversight authority over the rail shipments of ferrous scrap material. So at best, you could call the Office of Public Assistance and you could complain about it, and they could pick up the phone and call the rail office, the railroads, and ask them, make them aware that they got this complaint. That's all they can do. Nothing.
And so
we have no remedies at all.
And so this essentially creates stability and lower pricing for the transportation so it's easier to plan and execute a recycling program?
Well, what it really does is it gives us a remedy. It gives us an option. Right now, we really don't have any remedies if we get poor service or if the railroads want to charge us whatever they want to charge us. We basically, our option is don't move it or try another way to do it. Put it on trucks, which we don't have the same ability to do any longer. And trucking can only, especially for ferrous material, it takes about 4 of those trucks to fill a train car.
Far less efficient.
And so, so what we're also trying to do is that if you look at the way trucks operate, if you ship ferrous 200 to 250 miles, that's the limit that you can send it before it's starting to, you're costing too much to ship it at that point. You're losing money on what we're doing. So what the beauty of the rail in this case is it allows one of my members, say in West Virginia, to be able to ship their product. So right now, he's in West Virginia and he only has maybe 1 or 2 customers within a 250 mile radius that he can sell to. So he's at their whim. And, they may not need all the stuff that he's selling them, and they can dictate the price. They can do whatever they want, and he really doesn't have much of an option. But with the rail, he now can ship to somebody in Missouri or Indiana or someone in Alabama or South Carolina. He has all kinds of new markets. Plus, he could ship it to somebody. He could ship it to Virginia or South Carolina and put it on a ship and access the global marketplace. And that's what rail allows him to do. Otherwise, he doesn't have those marketplaces. And that's very important because as you were talking about earlier, is if you back this down the system before it gets to him, if he doesn't have those markets, he no longer is going to purchase the same amount of scrap. And that means the people in his area don't have the places to get rid of that scrap.
Right.
And so then what are they going to do? They either the prices aren't going to be very good, or they may just say, hey, this isn't worth doing. We'll hold on to it. We'll wait for another time. Or they might even take it somewhere else to try to sell it. That's very, very inefficient for them to do.
And it
also takes away their markets.
Right. And so this is what we've seen in other materials as a result of the China ban is municipalities just storehousing glass or plastic bales instead of sending them. So really by lowering the overall cost as well as creating a predictable infrastructure, we unleash their creativity to find new ways to get that to market.
Right. Because we're always competing, we're competing against virgin material. In all kinds of ways, both in the initial cost as well as the transportation. Because if I can't get the material to my yard or from my yard to my customer, I'm not doing well. That's that's the whole business. Get it, process it, sell it, and move it. And if I can't move it, I'm not in business very long here. And so that's why transportation, we are heavily dependent on transportation. We have to move that material, and it has to be moved. We have to have a reliable and efficient, transportation network, and the railroads are very, very integral into that. And so that's why we believe in times have changed since the original exemptions were put into place. Things have changed. The transportation networks have changed. The costs have changed. And so we need simply the oversight from the Surface Transportation Board over our commodities now.
So let's turn to another major aspect of what the recycling industry needs, and that's workers, both with regard to training and preparing people to work in the industry and to protect them and to protect their safety when working in these environments, which can be dangerous. What do you think the U.S. needs to be doing to prepare people to work in the recycling industry?
Well, you've made a couple points. Let me make one real quick. Is that safety our motto is safety or not at all. We have a very robust safety program here with a number of my colleagues who spend almost their entire time out at our members' facilities helping them become safer. They're doing facility blueprints. They're showing them and how to be safer. And, there's the old adage, it's better to hear the it's better to hear the bad news from your friends than it is, from the regulator. And so we try to make sure that when the regulator shows up, our members have fixed problems, that they have learned from from some of the omissions or whatever they've been doing, and that they're a better facility. And by being safer, they're being better, they're being more efficient, and they're saving money. And that's going to help them in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. Mm-hmm. So safety is a very, very important thing. And especially as workers are becoming harder and harder to find, we certainly don't want them to be hurt and not be able to return to work right away. So yes, our membership is desperately looking for more workers. Just like many other industries, as this labor pool is very tight. And so we're competing against a lot of people for a lot of the same workers. ISRI is working with a lot of other organizations like NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, to look at legislation and other types of worker programs to get people back into the workforce or into the workforce, and to consider, especially as they're entering for the first time or re-entering, to consider the scrap recycling industry as a great occupation. Some of those things are like hiring veterans, education and training programs, apprenticeships, and it's working with universities, especially for everything from accountants to metallurgists to chemists and things like that. There's so many opportunities in the recycling industry that a lot of people just simply are just unaware of. And when you think about the size of the recycling industry, it's a $117 billion industry here in the United States. We employ over 150,000 direct workers. And a lot of those workers, they range, from people who are accepting the material, it's inspecting the material as it comes in, to people who are operating a lot of heavy machinery, all the way to the people who are brokering and trading, buying and selling the material. So there's a lot of opportunities in this industry, and just a lot of people that are not aware of them, and in a lot of cases they're not even aware of who our industry is and all the wonderful things that we do and how dynamic it is.
That was also the thing that I realized going to the conference is this deep commitment to the environment, but in a practical, business-driven perspective that was inspiring, and it was particularly entrepreneurial. It was a lot of family businesses growing up into major businesses. How do you see the recycling industry as a setting for a young entrepreneur these days? Is it a rich target, or do you see challenges for them?
Oh, it's always a rich target. I was just talking to someone I've been working with at one of our larger companies for many, many years. And he called up, and I was thinking, oh boy, he wants to talk about this program again. And he called up to say, no, I'm going off to start my own business. And, and I'm going to be an ISRI member. And I just wanted to let you know so that, we could work on a couple of these projects together. That happens more often. We have another person, who I'd worked with for a number of years, been a chairman of several of the committees and the divisions that I had been staffed to. And he had worked for one of the tried and true ISRI members for many, many years. And he went off and started his own business with a couple of other people from different companies. And they're brokers. There's a lot of opportunity, even in the old, the ferrous and non-ferrous businesses. Where you think, well, those companies have been around for a long time. There's always a place for somebody new, to get in there. But then when you look at some of the other, I will call the newer commodities to ISRI that have come in the last 25, 30 years, the plastics, the paper, the rubber, and glass, textiles, electronics, there's so many opportunities. And I'll jump into electronics real quickly. Sure. In the matter of 25 years, we've had an industry that didn't exist to morphine at least 2 or 3 times, and have actually moved into more of the repair and the reuse business. And coincidentally, we're seeing a lot of the the used auto parts part of our membership that's finding themselves, they've been doing this for, decades and decades and decades. Yep. But they're finding themselves with the same challenges that the electronics industry, the recycling industry segment is as well. Their issues are largely not only symbolically the same, they are the same. Because the technology that's being integrated into these products. Sure. And so a lot of them are going to there's an overlap between a number of our committees and divisions now where people who didn't even know who the other people at the organization were are now becoming very close friends and becoming business associates with that. So there's, again, opportunity left and right. And just to put give you a couple of, for a better word, benchmarks in time. Mm-hmm. Just over 12 years ago, we think of having a smartphone in our hand as something that we don't know what to do without anymore. And for better or for worse. But a little over 12 years ago, it didn't exist. Mm-hmm. We have a whole industry that evolved to recycle them and to repair them and to reuse and resell them. That has evolved over a very, very short period of time. And it's actually changed several times in those 12 years to what that is today. So you think, well, that industry segment is effectively moving at the speed minus, basically a 3-year delay than the consumer electronics industry, which is moving at the fastest pace of,
sure,
on the history of mankind. Yeah. So the electronics recycling industry and now the used car parts, part of our, more the staid, older group of our industry are now moving at that pace. So think about the car that you have with all the new technology features that are in there, from photonics to keep you from crashing into somebody, to the GPS, to all the data that goes into your car to make it work, and all the personal data that goes into your car. That's a whole new business model of destroying the data. And that's a whole new part of the business that's coming along.
I remember 25 or 30 years ago when the microprocessors first started to make their way into the car. And, in the 90s, you might have had 5 or 6 processors in a car. Today, there are hundreds. And the data that's stored in all those different parts of the vehicle need to be erased for the security of the previous owner. That's another service business that layers into recycling, like we were talking about before. Every step along the way, and those steps expand because of the expansion of the materials and the opportunity to recycle because of technology, our ability to turn things into new things. It's just a remarkable time to be thinking about how to make circular economics work.
That's right. And so when you ask the question, is there an opportunity? Are there opportunities still in the recycling business? Oh yeah. And in 5 years from now, with this, what I call the velocity of change that's coming on to a lot of the products that have been coming into our yards, it's going to change. We no longer have a lot of the products that used to come in, and now we have a whole new slew of new products that we never could have dreamed of, like the iPhone and things like that. But we also see them made out of new materials, and we see them made out of less materials, which is good. This is good for the environment. This is good for natural resource conservation, is that we're using less materials to make newer products. And we have to figure out how to recycle them. And that's where the adaptive and the dynamic, industry comes into play. Our members are pretty inventive people. They when they hear, when these big changes happen, of course they are, kind of whine a little bit about them, but then they figure out how to take advantage of them and take quite a good advantage of them. And, I could talk about the electronics side of it forever, but we're going to see this we're already seeing it in the paper and the plastics. We're seeing it in the glass. We're seeing it in all these other commodities. As they understand what the problems that they're facing are, and especially if they're not imposed on them regulatorily or something like that, these guys can figure out how to fix these things for themselves. They can find those new markets. they can find that they will invent new technology to be able to solve these problems. Just a little bit of another historical benchmark for you is, before the auto shredder, which seems like, when was that? Well, it's a lot longer than when we used to not have smartphones attached to our hands.
Right.
Back in that day, our members torched cars. They cut them apart, with either, shears or blow torches and things, acetylene torches. They cut them apart, and they could do, 4, 7, 10, maybe a day.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking pretty efficient. Today, a mega shredder can eat about, 300 or 400 of them in an hour. We process, between 12 and 15 million cars a day. And that, was, when our industry looked at it as, look, there are more people there. They're buying more cars. There are more cars that are going to come into our yards. We look at that as a great opportunity. And so the auto shredder was invented to take care of that. And so now you see shredders, several hundred shredders around the country that are processing millions of cars a year and putting all that material back into the process. And then we found, you look at all this other material that we're not getting to take advantage of, that we need to have much more sophisticated separating and sorting technology to do. And lo and behold, what happened? The eddy current machines, all these other sorting and separation machines that have come since then. And now we have this issue with China that has basically been a kick in the pants for a lot of people to go to the next level. And we will probably face some more challenges as time goes on. Well, I hope they do, because it's just making us better. And we're going to recycle better and more efficiently. We're going to, and this is a good thing. So in a lot of ways,
nobody enjoys change, but those who work their way through it can really find tremendous success. And
absolutely,
we're not going to get there by standing still.
Well, a lot of our members are, they actually like the change because they know that every time there's a change, there's an opportunity. And
that's the entrepreneurial way of thinking about this.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know any of any of my members that aren't pretty entrepreneurial. They do amazing things. And one of the I guess the coolest part of my job in many days is when I take somebody out to see a scrapyard for the first time, be it a policymaker or just somebody that I've been asked to go to take them to a scrapyard, and I take them to even just a run-of-the-mill scrapyard. Although every one of our members is special, and they all do something different. They all kind of do the same thing. To see the look on people's faces when they see that and they understand what is going on, and at the end of the day, I get the same reaction from every one of them, and that is, wow, I never knew this existed. And when I get that from them, I know it's time to go home, because I have succeeded in opening that mind up. And anybody that's thinking about going into this industry, and we really need a lot of more talented people to getting in there. It is a wide open industry with all types of new challenges. And if you can break the challenge, you can fix that challenge, you've got a terrific opportunity. And and most of my members, I think they look at these challenges that are coming up now, and they go, "This looks like an opportunity to me.
Yeah, I'll take it on." Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, thank you. That both inspiring and tremendously informative. I also would encourage anybody who's listening to check out the ISRI conference, which will be taking place the week of April 10th. Can't remember the exact dates, 8th through the 12th, actually. And it'll be in Los Angeles. So if you are in the region, there is a special conference that ISRI is hosting on the residential recycling challenge. I'll actually be moderating a panel on the plastics problem. And this is an open event in the sense that you can get into this part of the conference to participate. So check out the ISRI site to do that. Billy Johnson, our guest, is the chief economist at ISRI, the Institute of
Lobbyist. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm the chief lobbyist. Joe Pickard, who's actually the smart one around here, he's the chief economist.
I'm sorry. I will, and we're going to talk to Joe soon too. So I'm mixing my chiefs, but I will.
He'll give you lots of good facts and figures, which I'm a lobbyist because I can't really do math. So there you go.
Well, Billy, thank you very much for joining us today on Sustainability in the Air.
Well, folks. Oh well, thank you for the opportunity, and to really talk about how wonderful an industry this is, and it never ceases to amaze me at how they overcome insurmountable challenges.
Well, again, inspiring, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again about it. So let's keep up on it.
Well, we'll see you in LA.
Indeed, you will. Folks, check us out in LA. Come on down to the event if you can. Reach out to Earth911 through feedback at earth911.com. If you'd like to arrange a meeting, I'll be there on the 11th and 12th, and always interested in talking to our readers. We'll be back with another episode of Sustainability in Your Ear soon. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and this is Earth911. Thanks, everyone.